It was a blistering July afternoon in 2006, in a sleepy corner of Albuquerque, New Mexico. The air smelled of grilled meat, cheap beer, and sunscreen. Emma stood near the folding table covered with coleslaw, buns, and store-brand soda, holding a paper plate stacked with potato salad and ribs. She wore a soft blue dress that clung to her figure in all the ways she hated, but it was the only thing that fit after she'd outgrown most of her closet. Her husband, Rick, was across the yard with a cold beer in one hand and a smirk in the other. His friends from work surrounded him, laughing a little too loud. Rick was always louder when he was around others, especially when he was mocking her. And today, she felt it in her bones that he was building up to something cruel. Emma hoped she was wrong. She wasn't. As she walked toward him, Rick raised his voice and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Y'all better clear the path. Here comes the earthquake in heels." Laughter exploded around him like a punch to the chest. Emma froze. People turned their heads. Some laughed with him. Others looked down, uncomfortable. No one defended her. Rick wasn't done. "Seriously, Emma, how many ribs did you grab? Leave some for the rest of us. This ain't a buffet." He laughed. They laughed, and Emma died a little inside. She wanted to drop her plate and run, but she stood there, paralyzed, cheeks burning, heart pounding. Rick walked over and whispered, pretending to be playful, "Babe, you know I'm just kidding. Don't be so sensitive." But they both knew he meant every word. Emma weighed over 300 pounds then, but her real burden wasn't just the weight. It was the way Rick made her feel like she was worth less with every pound she carried. Like her value as a woman, her beauty, her power, her voice, diminished with every bite she took. She didn't always used to feel this way. In their early years, Rick was different. Kind, even. Back when they first met at a diner in downtown Albuquerque, she was heavier than most. But Rick had claimed to love her curves. He called her real. But over time, as the years and pounds added up, something in him shifted. And slowly, something in her broke. That night, after the barbecue, Emma sat alone on the edge of their bed. Her plate of ribs had gone untouched. Her hands were trembling. Rick was snoring, passed out drunk from the celebration of her humiliation. She looked at herself in the mirror. For a long time. The woman staring back wasn't just big. She looked invisible, forgotten, like she didn't belong to herself anymore. Emma whispered to the empty room, "This can't be my life." She had no money of her own. Rick controlled every dollar, reminding her she had no real contribution. He said things like, "I work for this family. You just sit and eat." The financial dependence made her feel trapped, powerless. But something shifted inside, her that night. A quiet voice began to rise, a whisper of rebellion, a flicker of worth. Not just for the weight, but for her freedom, her dignity, her health, her future, her values. She didn't know how yet, but one thing was clear. Emma wasn't going to let Rick write her story anymore. She would find a way to earn her own money. She would build her own prosperity. She would fight for her health, not just to lose pounds, but to regain her power. She would rediscover the richness of a life where she mattered. And one day, he would regret every word. But for now, she wiped her tears and stood tall, even if her knees were shaking. The journey had to start somewhere, and it started there, in Albuquerque, in 2006, after the barbecue that broke her. The Monday after the barbecue felt like a funeral inside Emma's chest. Rick had already left for work by 6:30 that morning, the front door slamming like a final insult. The silence that followed was thick. Emma sat at the edge of the kitchen table, her fingers curled around a lukewarm mug of coffee. No cream, no sugar, just bitter, like everything else in her life. The early Albuquerque sun filtered through the blinds, casting lines across the floor like prison bars. The air smelled of heat, dust, and yesterday's shame. Her body still ached from standing so long at the party, her feet swollen, her knees stiff. She used to push that pain aside. Today, she felt it, and she let herself feel it. Emma had always been the one to clean, to cook, to care. Rick brought home the money, but he made sure she never forgot it. Every dollar had strings. Groceries? Use the food stamps. A haircut? That ain't a necessity. New shoes? Lose some weight and maybe they'll last longer. She whispered to herself, I need to find a way out. Her eyes landed on the dusty computer in the corner of the room. It had been Rick's old work laptop, half forgotten, slow, but still functional. Emma pulled it onto the table and turned it on. It groaned like an old truck, but it lit up. She opened a browser. Her hands trembled. It had been years since she had searched for anything that wasn't a recipe or coupon. She typed, "Remote jobs for beginners." For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about losing weight. She was thinking about earning, about reclaiming her value, $1 at a time. Not to impress Rick, not to escape, but to remember what power felt like. Most listings were a dead end. Too technical, too much experience required. But after 2 hours and 4 cups of coffee, she found one. A small e-commerce site needed part-time help with customer emails. The pay was modest, but it was her money if she got it, her own prosperity waiting to be claimed. Emma applied. She didn't tell Rick. Later that night, he came home smelling like gas station beer and disappointment. "You still moping around about Saturday?" he said, tossing his boots near the couch. Emma didn't answer. He looked at her, annoyed. "Look, I ain't got time for your mood swings. You either toughen up or stay broken." Emma stared at him for a long moment. Not with anger, not with fear, but with something different. Clarity. She didn't argue. She just stood, picked up his boots, placed them by the door, and went to bed. The next morning, an email popped up in her inbox. "Congratulations, Emma. You're hired. Training starts Monday at 10 a.m. She stared at the screen, tears stinging her eyes. Not because someone gave her a job, but because someone finally saw her as useful, capable, worth something beyond her weight. Over the next weeks, Emma worked in silence while Rick was at his job. She took notes. She watched tutorials. She got faster, smarter, stronger. And with her first $200, she opened her own bank account. She didn't touch the money yet. Just seeing it there was a reminder of what she was building. A future. A life beyond shame. A version of herself Rick would never understand. A woman with values, with purpose, with plans. Emma knew she had a long road ahead. She still weighed over 300 pounds. Her knees still hurt. The mirror still made her flinch. But now there was something new behind her eyes. Fire. She started walking. Just 10 minutes at first. Then 20. She swapped soda for water. She downloaded a free meal plan. She stopped eating Rick's leftover pizza. It wasn't about pounds. It was about health, about reclaiming the energy he drained out of her for so long. One night, Rick tossed his crusts onto her plate and said, "You gonna finish those?" Emma looked him in the eye and said, calm and steady, "No, I'm full." He blinked, confused, like he didn't recognize her voice. And maybe he didn't. Because little by little, day by day, Emma was becoming someone new. She wasn't just losing pounds, she was gaining power, and soon, the world would notice. It was the second week of August, 2006, when Emma received her first full paycheck. $248.65. She stared at the email from the payment processor like it was a letter from the universe itself. Her hands were still sticky from folding laundry, but her heart beat faster than it had in years. She printed it. Not to show Rick, never that, but to feel it in her hands. Her own money. Earned by her own time, her own mind. It wasn't much by most people's standards, but to Emma, it was proof that she wasn't invisible anymore. It was the beginning of her prosperity. Emma opened a savings account that same day. The young woman at the credit union looked up and asked, "Do you have a financial goal for this account, ma'am?" Emma smiled. Freedom. By the end of that month, she had earned close to $700. Rick never noticed. Or maybe he just assumed the groceries were getting cheaper. But Emma was making careful moves. Quiet investments. She canceled the junk food orders, cut back on cable, replaced processed snacks with fresh vegetables. Her fridge started to reflect her values. Simple, nourishing, clean. She started watching YouTube videos on health and emotional healing while she worked. She took walks around the block at dawn before Rick woke up. The pounds started to fall, slow but steady. After 6 weeks, she was down 17 pounds. By Thanksgiving, she'd lost 34. Her face looked sharper, her steps lighter, her breath easier. One morning, Rick looked at her from across the kitchen and said, "You look different. You sick or something?" Emma didn't flinch. She just said, "I'm changing." Rick shrugged. "Just don't expect a medal." But Emma wasn't expecting anything from him anymore. Her transformation wasn't for applause. It was for survival. One Thursday afternoon, Emma overheard Rick on the phone in the garage, laughing. "Nah, man, she's still big. She's just acting like she's better now, walking like she's got some kind of purpose. It's hilarious." Emma stood quietly outside the door, the words cutting into her like ice. But something strange happened inside her. She didn't cry. She smiled. Because he was scared. He was laughing, yes, but it was nervous laughter. He saw the change, and it unsettled him. He didn't know where she was headed, but he could feel that wherever it was beyond his reach. That night, Emma opened her laptop and applied for a business license. She had learned just enough customer service and e-commerce skills to start a tiny online store reselling home goods. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She called it Humble Home Finds. It would be slow at first, but it would grow. Wealth, after all, didn't mean private jets. Sometimes wealth started with one person deciding to never be powerless again. Emma started keeping a journal, daily entries about her emotional triggers, the habits she was breaking, the dreams she didn't allow herself to have before. She wrote about walking past the bakery without stopping, about saying no to Rick's Friday night nachos, about waking up at 5 a.m. just to breathe before the day began. Each word was a reminder that she had value, not because of how she looked, but because of what she was becoming. By Christmas, Emma had lost almost 50 pounds. Rick's teasing slowed, not because he was being kind, but because he didn't know what version of her would show up next. Emma had changed her hair, started wearing color again, a splash of lipstick on Sundays. And when she got her second bonus check from the side business, $360, she used it to buy a standing desk and a new pair of walking shoes. "Where'd you get those?" Rick asked one night. Emma looked at him and said, "I paid for them." "With what money?" She smiled. "Mine." Rick laughed. "You? What are you doing? Selling dreams?" "No," she said. "I'm building one." He didn't reply. Emma didn't wait for one, because she knew that riches weren't always in the bank. Sometimes the true richness of life was waking up in your own power, breathing deep, and knowing you were becoming the woman they never thought you'd be. And Emma? She was just getting started. By mid-February of 2007, Emma had lost over 70 pounds. But the numbers on the scale weren't the only thing that had changed. Her walk had more confidence, her voice had more volume, and her silence had more weight. She was no longer the woman who tiptoed around Rick's moods. She was reclaiming her space. Her online business, Humble Home Finds, was bringing in consistent income now. Not millions, but enough to give her breathing room. Enough to buy her own groceries. Enough to pay her phone bill. Enough to taste a little of that freedom that used to feel like a fairy tale. And most importantly, enough money to build choices. Every Thursday morning, Emma walked 2 miles to a little fitness studio off Central Avenue. It wasn't a fancy gym. It didn't have marble counters or juice bars, but it was hers. The owner, Clarissa, a 50-year-old powerhouse of a woman, greeted her each week with, "Look who's glowing today." Clarissa had become Emma's secret cheerleader. They would sit after sessions and talk about food, emotions, old wounds, and future goals. One afternoon, as Emma tied her sneakers, Clarissa said something that stuck with her. "You know, people think transformation is about willpower. It's not. It's about knowing you're worth the effort." That night, Emma wrote those words in her journal, right under the header Personal Values. She wasn't chasing thinness. She was chasing health, dignity, and emotional prosperity. Rick, meanwhile, was growing quieter. Not out of kindness, but confusion. He couldn't control what he couldn't understand. Emma cooked her own meals now. Salmon, greens, quinoa. She said no to late-night burgers, no to his cruel jokes, and no to him touching her like she was a burden, not a wife. One evening, Rick came home with a pizza box and tried to slide it toward her. "You earned a cheat day, right?" Emma looked up from her laptop. "I don't eat for rewards or punishment anymore, Rick," he scoffed. "Oh, look at you, all high and mighty now." "No," she said calmly. "Just clear." That was the night Emma stopped waiting for his approval. She logged into her business account after dinner and saw a 3-digit sale, her biggest yet. She gasped quietly. She placed her hand on her heart and whispered, "This is what wealth feels like." Not cash, not applause, but the moment you realize you created something out of nothing, and no one can take it from you. By spring, Emma had dropped 90 pounds. Her skin was glowing. Her energy was back. Her laugh came easier. She started volunteering once a week at the local library, helping women apply for online jobs. Women like her, stuck, dismissed, forgotten. "You think I can really do this?" one woman asked her. Emma smiled, holding her hand. "I didn't believe I could either, until I did." Every step she took away from Rick was a step closer to herself. And yet Rick was watching. He started to stay home more, checking her phone, asking where she was going, who she was talking to. "You got someone else?" he asked one night, his tone sharp. Emma looked him dead in the eye. "Yeah, me." The silence that followed was louder than any fight they'd ever had. She didn't owe him her breakdown anymore. She didn't owe him her healing either. Rick didn't know that by the time summer rolled around, Emma would be 160 pounds lighter than when her journey started. He didn't know that in less than 6 months, she would leave that house with her name on a new lease, her business fully hers, and her bank account proof that richness doesn't always come with gold cards. It comes with courage. But for now, Emma was patient. Because real power doesn't yell, it builds. And hers was rising like a storm on the edge of Albuquerque. By late May of 2007, the scale read 143 pounds. Emma stood barefoot in her tiny bathroom in Albuquerque, the early morning sun casting soft golden lines across the floor. Her breath caught in her throat, not from disbelief, but from pride. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her collarbones visible, her jawline sharp, her eyes wide and clear. There was no makeup on, no fancy clothes, just Emma. Whole, new, fierce. She had lost exactly 160 pounds. But what she had gained? It was beyond measure. Health, self-respect, emotional strength, financial power, prosperity. Her skin glowed now, not just from the food she chose, but from the peace she no longer had to fight for daily. She was no longer surviving Rick's moods or his insults. She was growing past them. By now, her online store had taken off. She was making over $800 a week, sometimes more during the holidays. She hired a virtual assistant, started saving for a used car. Emma was learning about taxes, marketing, customer service, and fulfillment. She wasn't just making money. She was building a life on her own terms. On June 1st, Emma signed the lease for a one-bedroom apartment near the University of New Mexico. It was modest. Off-white walls, old hardwood floors, but it had a balcony and good light. She paid for it in full with her own business income. No cosigner, no begging, no man involved. She moved out on a Wednesday. Rick had no idea. She waited until he left for work, packed only what she needed, and left her wedding ring on the counter next to a note that said simply, "I'm not your joke anymore." By the time Rick got home that evening, the house was quiet, emptier than he'd ever known. No dinner on the stove, no woman to mock, no soft body to dump his shame into. Just silence. And her absence. Emma, meanwhile, stood barefoot on the balcony of her new place, sipping tea. The night was warm, quiet. She could hear the hum of traffic and a dog barking in the distance, but inside her chest, peace for the first time in years. That weekend, she hung photos of her younger self on the wall, not to mourn who she was, but to honor her. That girl who held on when everything felt like it was falling apart. That woman who kept breathing even when the world told her she wasn't enough. Emma got into a rhythm, walking in the mornings, answering emails by 9, shipping packages by noon, learning new skills by night. She signed up for an online course in business finance. She created a second savings account labeled Freedom Fund. And each Friday she moved $50 into it, no matter what. That summer, Emma bought her first car, a used blue Honda Civic, paid in cash. "You paying with all of that?" the salesman asked, eyeing the envelope of bills. Emma smiled. "Every single cent." "Good for you," he said, impressed. She nodded. "It's more than a car. It's proof." She drove home with the windows down, music playing, heart full. One day in late July, Emma received a text from an unknown number. "Can we talk?" It was Rick. She stared at the screen for a moment, then set the phone down. No reply. 2 days later, she received a knock at her door. She opened it slowly. Rick stood there, disheveled, holding a bouquet of gas station flowers. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "I messed up." She didn't speak. "I didn't realize what I had. You look different. You're glowing. You're happy." "I am," she said softly. He took a step forward. "I was thinking maybe we could—" "No," she interrupted. "You don't get to come back just because I got better. I didn't grow for you. I grew to get away from you." He looked down, embarrassed. "I brought flowers." Emma shook her head. "I don't need flowers, Rick. I needed respect back when it mattered." He nodded slowly. "I get it now." She closed the door gently. That night she journaled under the moonlight, wrote about what it meant to own your own life, to choose yourself every single day, to stop shrinking for people who only noticed you when you disappeared. Her story had started in pain, but it no longer belonged to it. Emma wasn't just lighter in weight, She was lighter in spirit, richer in purpose, and more alive than ever. August in Albuquerque carried a dry, relentless heat. But Emma felt cool inside her skin, like her body was no longer fighting her, like her spirit had finally caught up with her reflection. She had reached a kind of calm that most people spend their whole lives chasing. Her mornings began early, always before the sun. She made coffee, lit a candle, and wrote in her journal for 20 minutes. Then came her walk. 3 miles now, steady and strong. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every dog that barked from behind a fence, every neighbor who waved. She was no longer just living. She was thriving, and people were starting to notice. One afternoon, Clarissa, her trainer and now dear friend, sat across from her at a small cafe on Central. "You know, Emma," she said, stirring her iced tea, "there's a light about you these days. You don't just look different, you feel different." Emma smiled. "It's peace. Feels expensive?" Clarissa laughed. "That's 'cause it is." They talked about expanding Emma's online store, about new product lines, about turning her brand into something bigger, something that could help other women. Clarissa even offered to partner with her on a small health and wellness event for the fall. Emma wasn't sure how to dream this big before, but now, she was all in. That night, Emma walked into her apartment, sat at her desk, and opened a spreadsheet she had labeled Business Vision. She broke it down into phases: Q1 growth, Q2 profit margin, Q3 expansion. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She whispered, "Let's build something that lasts, not just for money, but for freedom, for her values, and for the quiet girls watching who still didn't know their own power." Rick, on the other hand, had been texting more often now. Messages that ranged from pathetic to passive-aggressive. "Hope you're doing okay. Don't forget where you came from. You think you're better now?" Emma read them and never replied. She had learned to stop giving time to people who only loved her when she was easy to ignore. But one message caught her eye. "You really lost 160? Damn." It was the first time Rick acknowledged her transformation, and somehow that made her laugh, because it wasn't about the weight. It was about every boundary she built. Every pound she lost was a moment she chose herself. Every salad, every walk, every early morning, every client served, every dollar earned, every moment of silence she gave herself instead of a screaming match. That was the real wealth. And now Emma was thinking long-term. She scheduled her first trip, an out-of-state women's empowerment conference in Phoenix. She bought the ticket herself, booked her own hotel, and printed the itinerary with pride. "This is what prosperity feels like," she said, placing the papers in her planner. She bought a new outfit for the event, something sleek, fitted soft green. She wore simple gold earrings and a pair of nude heels that made her feel like she could walk into any room and be seen, respected. At the conference, she introduced herself not as someone recovering, but as someone rising. "I run an online brand. I focus on empowering women through home products and emotional growth," she said to a table of business owners. She handed out cards. She made connections. She belonged. One of the keynote speakers said something that stuck with her. "Your pain isn't just your past. It's your power. Use it." Emma scribbled it in her notebook. She flew home from Phoenix feeling like a woman who had come back from the dead. Not just slimmer, not just stronger, but clearer. She walked back into her apartment and looked around at what she had built. Clean space, organized shelves, a thriving small business, a full pantry, and her soul intact. She wasn't looking for applause. She was looking forward, because there was more ahead than behind now. And Emma, this woman from Albuquerque, This woman who used to cry herself to sleep. This woman who lost 160 pounds and found a whole new life was becoming the version of herself no one believed she could be. Not even Rick. Especially not Rick. It was a crisp Saturday morning in early October of 2007. The sky over Albuquerque was wide and clear, painted in deep blue, with just a hint of fall in the breeze. Emma had just finished her walk along Ridgecrest Drive when she spotted an envelope at her apartment door. No return address. She opened it slowly, her heart already warning her. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was messy, rushed. Her name was at the top. Emma, I know I've got no right to ask for anything, but I need you to read this. I've been thinking about what I did to you, for years. You didn't deserve any of it. You were always there, always loyal. I couldn't see it then. And now you're gone. And I see it all too clearly. I was cruel, I was small, and you? You were always more than I could handle. I see the photos. I hear about your business. You're everywhere now, and I'm still here, still stuck. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're really as happy as you look. You earned it. Rick Emma sat down on the front step and stared at the letter for a long time. Not with tears, not with hate, but with a kind of settled, grounded calm. He finally saw her. But it didn't matter anymore, because she didn't need his validation. That afternoon, she met Clarissa for lunch. A small cafe downtown, tucked between a yoga studio and a boutique bookstore. Clarissa looked up from her salad and said, "You okay? You're quiet today." Emma nodded. "He wrote me an apology." Clarissa raised a brow. "And how do you feel?" Emma smiled. "Like I don't need it." They clinked their iced teas together like champagne glasses. "I'm proud of you," Clarissa said. "You didn't just lose 160 pounds. You lost the chains that kept you small." Emma looked out the window at the Albuquerque streets. People walking dogs, kids playing with sidewalk chalk. Life moving forward. "I kept thinking revenge would be him suffering," she said quietly. "But I think the real revenge is peace." That week, Emma was featured in a local magazine for women in business. The article included her before and after photos, her story, and a quote that read, "My weight was never my problem. Believing I wasn't worthy, that was the real weight." Her inbox flooded with messages from women across New Mexico and beyond. "You gave me hope. I'm starting my walk tomorrow. I left him. Because of you." Emma answered every single message. She knew what it meant to feel unseen. And now that she had found her voice, she refused to stay silent. Her online store hit a milestone, $10,000 in lifetime sales. She celebrated by donating part of it to a local shelter for women. She posted about it, writing, "Real wealth isn't what you hold, it's what you give back." Her audience grew, so did her influence. And slowly, without trying to, Emma became a symbol, not of weight loss, but of self-worth, of transformation, of choosing yourself even when no one else does. Then, one afternoon in late October, she saw Rick again. She was volunteering at a food bank. He walked in, eyes down, holding a clipboard. He didn't see her at first. When he finally did, he froze. Emma kept packing canned goods, calm, kind, unshaken. He walked over, hat in hand. "Emma," he said, voice low. "You look—" "I know," she said, not looking up. "I didn't think I'd run into you here." "I give back now," she said simply. "Feels right." He nodded slowly. "I meant what I wrote." She met his eyes. "I believe you." A long pause. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked. Emma smiled. "Not cruel, just clear. You already did it. You let me go." She picked up another bag of rice, handed it to a family in line, and walked away. She didn't need a scene. She didn't need closure. She had her values, her peace, her prosperity, her health, her dignity, her name. And now, finally, the apology that had once felt so far away. But Emma had learned something no one had ever taught her. Closure doesn't come from others. It comes when you no longer need what they refused to give. The year was coming to an end. It was the final Sunday of December, 2007. Albuquerque was cold that morning. A light frost clung to the rooftops, and the mountains in the distance looked like they'd been dipped in powdered sugar. Emma stood on the balcony of her apartment, wrapped in a soft cream sweater, holding a warm mug of green tea. She was 37 years old. She weighed 143 pounds. She had no husband, no shame, no fear, only peace. Inside, her laptop was open, displaying the final draft of a blog post she'd titled, "Becoming Her." It wasn't about the weight loss. It was about values, about climbing out of emotional debt, about building a life rich in health, prosperity, and purpose. Her business had hit a new high, over $15,000 in earnings that quarter. She had launched a second product line and was now mentoring a small group of women from across the country. Some single moms, some survivors, some just stuck. All of them looking for the next version of themselves. Emma had become exactly what Rick said she never would be. Independent, happy, successful. She didn't flaunt her money. She didn't chase luxury. Her version of wealth looked like waking up without anxiety, like choosing who entered her life and who no longer got to stay. Later that afternoon, she stood in front of a small group of women at a community event held at the local co-op. She wore black jeans, a rust-colored blouse, and a pair of boots that made her feel grounded. She spoke without notes. "When I started this journey, I thought I was trying to fix my body. But what I really needed to fix was the story I believed about myself. For years, I thought my size made me less valuable. But I've learned something different." She paused, scanning the room. "Your size does not determine your worth. Your relationship status doesn't determine your future. And your past, it does not own you." Applause filled the room. Some women cried, others simply nodded. After the talk, a young woman approached her. "Emma, can I ask, when did it stop hurting?" Emma thought for a moment. "It didn't stop hurting," she said gently. "I just stopped waiting for someone else to fix it." That night, back home, she lit a candle, turned on soft music, and wrote her goals for the new year. 1. Launch an online course to help women build their own income. 2. Speak at 3 national events. 3. Pay off the last of her student debt. 4. Dance more. She chuckled at that last one. And then she added, 5. Keep choosing myself, every single day. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, there was no one there. Just a small bouquet of lilies and a card tucked beneath it. The card read, "You became everything I said you couldn't. And I see now, that says more about me than it ever did about you. I'm sorry. Always, Rick." Emma picked up the flowers and placed them on the kitchen counter. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She didn't call him. She just smiled and whispered to herself, "I know who I am now." Because in the end, this wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about rebirth, about a woman born and raised in Albuquerque who turned her pain into power, who transformed 160 pounds of trauma into muscle, discipline, and direction, who turned silence into a business, who turned rejection into richness, and who proved, without a doubt, that the best kind of transformation doesn't just happen on the outside. It happens when you reclaim your voice, rewrite your story, and refuse to shrink ever again. And you? Have you ever lived something like this? Comment below. I'd love to hear your story, too.